Welcome to the BEASTwriter family where social media engagement is encouraged. I am your host, Ryan Sakamoto, and today we're going to be discussing on this Thursday, breaking down the secondary when it comes to the Chicago Bears, Pittsburgh Steelers, and your San Francisco 49ers. Now, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for subscribing to my channel. I'm seeing the numbers, they're going up. Thank you so much for your love and support and for retweeting the content and also resharing it on Facebook. Would it be the pages, would it be the groups, and all the other respective social media platforms. So mahalo for everyone for doing that. All right, we're going to go ahead and talk about it. If you guys watched my previous live streams or previous static videos, as I like to call them, in regards to Tom Brady to the 49ers potentially and what that would mean. And then I already talked about how, well, I don't want to go too much into it, but the whole rumor that, or idea, I should say, that Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo would be traded to the Green Bay Packers for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, all this is just clickbait material. It's really ridiculous. It's really bad. And I said earlier, I'm not going to waste your time. You know, when I hop on, I'm going to keep it 100 all the time. I'm not going to waste your time, and I hope you don't waste mine. You know, I value yours just as you value mine. So I'm going to keep it 100 all the time. So when I do hop on, it's actually real news. I'm just saying. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about it. We're not going to waste any more time. Let's talk about the Chicago Bears first, right? So we're going to talk about the Chicago Bears, the Steelers, and the 49ers secondary. Well, I look at the Chicago Bears as I continue to cover all 32, and they're transitioning to a 4-3 base from a 34 front. That really doesn't change the cover shells on the back end. Other than that, the defensive coordinator that's coming in, which is Alan Williams, how he's going to play his cover shells. Is it going to be a 2-deep look? Is it going to be a one single high look? Is it going to be a mirror match look? Like, what is he going to bring to the table, especially when you talk about the money downs on third downs? I think too many people and too often people make the mistake, oh, we're having this defensive coordinator. Oh, it's great because it's a household name. But sometimes household names don't make for big changes in terms of the personnel that they have to work with. I mean, there's some household names out there that stick to their ego and be like, nah, man, we're going to play our cover shell this, and I don't care what kind of personnel we have. You're going to have to get up to speed on what I'm trying to do, not the other way around. And I think that's the worst way of coaching, is that you should always tailor your coaching style to your team's strengths, to your player's strengths, putting in the best position to make plays. If you don't do that, it's all for naught. It doesn't matter who you have there. If you have a guy who's mainly a cover man, right, and can truly shut down in man-to-man coverage in a cover 2 or a cover 5 or whatever the case may be, and you're playing man underneath, well then yeah, that is good for a skill set. But if he's a zone guy and you want him to play man, well, that's not really going to work out. And then people wonder, oh, how come he's not getting it done? Well, it's not a scheme fit, right? So I do like what Alan Williams brings to the table. He's the new defensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears under Matt Eberflus, and he was the defensive backs coach previously. And what he brings to the table is he brings the hits analysis, right? And he talked about that in his pre-draft presser, or pre-draft presser. Well, yeah, I guess it would be a pre-draft presser, but his presser, right? His opening press conference when he was hired by the Chicago Bears. And he talked about hits analysis, which includes hustle, intensity, takeaways, and smart play. And I think when you have those 4 elements, you can really be successful. You know, with Indianapolis Colts, Darius Leonard was asked, hey, are you going to get tired of the hits analysis that Eberflus and Coach Williams were stressing? Nah, man. I like it. And look at Darius Leonard. Guy's a beast, right? So, best off-ball linebacker in the game right now. And then it's Fred Warner. So, secondary, let's talk about that. The ticker's already up here. All right, so let's talk about the secondary, right? So the secondary, who do they have, right? You look at the quartet of secondary players. You have Tashawn Gibson. He's all right. You have free safety Eddie Jackson. They're not going to move off that spot. Go Roll Tide Roll, because they signed him to a long-term deal. Even though new GM Ryan Poles is coming in, replacing Ryan Pace, and I'm Ryan Sakamoto, by the way. So there's a trio of Ryans. But you get the picture. Look, Eddie Jackson's not going to be moved, and he shouldn't be. He's a good free safety. Now, he's not going to be the best free safety. He's not a top 5 free safety in no estimation, but he's really, really good. I think he's a player that you can build around. And when you look around the league, he's probably one of the better free safeties in the league. Tashawn Gibson, not so much. All right. I think he's a liability on the back end, if you ask me. And when you take that into account, as I run grading systems on my BDF grading system covering all 32, well, I'm just going to say it. I said it all year, right? Vildor is horrible, and he's under contract, right? At one boundary cornerback spot. You also have Artie Burns, who's now a free agent, but he was with a first-round pick with the Steelers. We all saw what happened there. And then you have guys like Duke Shelley. Like, really? Like, who are these guys? Like, I'll be honest with you. I had no idea who these guys were until I started grading the film. Like, man, they're not good. Not good. Now, you do have Jalen Johnson. That's a good pickup. So, in the draft that they have. So, he's a good, solid player you can work around. He's not scheme dependent. He's scheme universal, right? So, you can kind of work around that. And then on top of that, you look at what they have other than 2/4 of their secondary. You have Tayshaun Gibson, Jalen Johnson, who knows what the other boundary cornerback is, and you have Eddie Jackson. So with $28.6 million in cap space to work with, and with Tyrann Mathieu being a free agent because the Kansas City Chiefs didn't re-sign him, he's free to sign whoever. I think Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, who was graded number 1 of all safety, whether it be free safety or strong safety, in my grading system, number 1 overall, should have been a first-team All-Pro, got my vote last year and got my vote this year. He is a guy that I would like to kind of change up that culture for Alan Williams. He'd be that secondary coach on the back end to kind of get people lined up pre-snap, kind of being that vocal leader on the back end, and also bringing that hits mentality because, let's face it, he's very smart. He also brings the hustle. He's intense, and he can create takeaways. So he already hits the cultural identity that the Chicago Bears want. Now, will Ryan Poles pull the trigger on that? Probably not. And I'll tell you why he won't. He believes in developing homegrown talent organically because he comes from the Kansas City Chiefs, which, by the way, hey, Tyrann Mathieu's from the Chiefs. But anyways, whatever. I don't think he's going to roll that route. And if he does, awesome. But if he doesn't, that's just not his MO. He likes to build through the draft and then keep his homegrown talent, which brings me to the question of Roquan Smith, the third best off-ball linebacker in my grading system. One of the best off-ball linebackers in the NFL. And in fact, he was graded number 1 as the top pass coverage linebacker in my grading system last year. And I'm talking about 2020, not 2021. So you put that all together, and what do you really get? You really get a team, right, that you're kind of transitioning to a 4-3 base. And you guys got to remember, from a 34 to a 4-3 under Matt Eberflus, you have to have the personnel to make that transition. I remember covering Chip Kelly, and they tried to transition from a 4-3 to a 3-4, and they switched out Ronald Blair and tried to make him an outside linebacker. Well, Ronald Blair, coming into the NFL, was strictly a 3-tech, even a 0. You can even plug him in as a 0-tech or 1-tech, but he was a nose tackle. That guy was big. And to have him drop so much weight to play outside linebacker like you did with Tank Carradine, who was also a 4-3 defensive end in college, would have been a top 15 pick had he not torn its ACL coming out of Florida State. And then he was obviously slipped to the second round, drafted number 40, moving back 6 spots with the Tennessee Titans from 34 to 40, and they got Justin Hunter. And then obviously the 49ers got Tank Carradine, and they tried to transition him from a 4-3 defensive end to a 3-4 outside linebacker. That didn't bode so well. And then you got Corey Lemonnier. Remember Corey Lemonnier? Guy out of Auburn, 3rd round pick. So you have all these missing, and it just really didn't work out with these guys. But the good news for the Chicago Bears is they can make that transition going the inverse. They can go from a 34 base to a 4-3 front, and Roquan Smith would definitely be the Mike linebacker. And then you have Danny Trevathan on the outside. Obviously, you have a good, solid defensive front 7 because now you have Robert Quinn and Khalil Mack being the edge defenders in that 4-3 front. They have a nice nucleus. Not too many people are going to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it. They have Eddie Goldman there, right? You want to talk about a guy who is very underrated. In my opinion, I like Eddie Goldman. Eddie Goldman's a beast. I liked him coming out of college. Really, really good stout. And he can 2-gap or 1-gap, whatever the case may be. He's not scheme dependent. You can really plug and play him. The question mark comes down to Hakeem Hicks. I already tweeted this out. I said they should get rid of Hakeem Hicks for a number of different reasons. And 1, age is a factor. And 2, money is a factor. You only have $28.6 million in cap space. So if you're looking at it from a GM's perspective and you're trying to create a perfect storm in that Super Bowl window, because it's only that 2-3 year window in the NFL, unless you have a superstar team like the Los Angeles Rams, you really don't have much to work with, which means if you only have 28.6 head above water going into the draft, and then you have to allocate so much money for that draft class based on the number of draft picks that you have, well, there's only so much money to go around. And then you can kind of maneuver and manipulate the salary cap how you see fit, restructuring current contract in the form of a signing bonus spread over the lifelong of the contract. That would save you money there. But realistically, I just don't see that happening. I don't see Hakeem Hicks coming back. I would rather them sign Bilal Nichols. And again, if you want to retain homegrown talent, which is the MO that Ryan Poles has always been about, because let's face it, he came from the bottom, now he's here, right? He was an NFL player himself. So I think he would rather have Bilal Nichols for the foreseeable future, spelling guys like Eddie Goldman, spelling guys like Angelo Blackson, rather than roll with Hakeem Hicks, who by far is the superior player. I'm not saying he's not. I'm just saying it doesn't create a perfect storm to extend a player when your cap space is very limited. All right. So you see how this domino affects the secondary, how it's going to affect the front end as well, right? You have to look at all different parameters in order to kind of see and foreshadow what's going to happen in the future. And I think that's what you have to look at. It is too many times over, fans look at the instant gratification rather than the long-term gains that we always talk about here in the BWF. And that's one of the things that I like to talk about. So there's that. And then you have the Steelers, right? Let's go on and talk about the Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers, one of the most loyal fan bases in the entire NFL, along with the 49ers, of course, and the Bears, and the Packers, and the Chiefs. Not so much the Rams, but, whatever. I know that's throwing shit at the Rams, but I don't mean to throw. It is what it is, man. Like they just don't have a fan base. The Rams don't have a fan base, and as much as, and I said it on the Relevant app, teamed up with Relevant, which I'll be on hosting another show on In the Huddle with Sean Salisbury, Tom McManus, my man Randy Cross, co-host of Don't Cross the Beast Empire, and Glenn Parker. All right, so we talked about it. They don't have a fan base. They just don't. Now, that doesn't dismiss that they're the best team in the NFL, but they just don't have a fan base. But getting back to the Pittsburgh Steelers, let's look at what they have going on, right? We talk about first-round draft picks and who ends up busts. Obviously, around this time, everyone's talking about, oh, this player is going to be awesome. Oh, he's compared to this player. It's like, nah, bro, like, not really. Not really. Let's talk about the secondary, all right? Strong safety Terrell Edmunds, all right, who's Tremaine Edmunds' brother for the Buffalo Bills. He was a first-round pick, all right? And the Steelers, he played so poorly during the first few years in Pittsburgh that the Steelers declined his fifth-year option. He's horrible. I should say he's horrible because he did have a nice contract year because they didn't pick up his fifth-year option this year. But is he worth the money that he's going to command if he otherwise would have been picked up that fifth-year option? No, absolutely not. And that's why GM Kevin Colbert made the move to say, hey, you know what? We're going to cut our losses now. And that's what I like about GM Kevin Colbert, who's in the last year of covering the draft because he's going to retire at the end of the year. He became the GM back in 2010. If you look at his track record, he's really, really good at what he does. He's, top 5 GM in my book all day, every day. You look at what he did. You look at the players he extended. You look at the good players that he let go. Excuse me, losing my voice here. I kind of sound like Sean McVay when I lost my voice right before the Super Bowl. But no, truth be told, he made some sound plays. If you look at the salary cap health in real time, I shouldn't say getting rid of, but they did because he was a free agent. They didn't re-sign Bud Dupree to a long-term deal. They let him go to Tennessee Titans, right? And then the reason for that is because they already had a plan B option. They drafted Alex Highsmith in the 3rd round, right? So they already had him groomed in for that role. And once Bud Dupree tore his ACL week 12 against the Baltimore Ravens, that left Alex Highsmith a lot of room to kind of get some snaps under his wing, so to speak, right? Get some playing time, get some real-time reps, because let's be honest, anybody who plays sports knows practice reps is different from playing reps, all right? You can be the best practice squad player, or practice player as we call it, and be like, dude, how come you couldn't do it when the lights were on? What's going on? Like on Sundays, you couldn't do it, bro. Like, what? Hey, that's just how it is. But with Alex Highsmith, he kind of saw the transition. And in my BWF grading system, graded Alex Highsmith ever since he came into the league. He's a good player. Now, he did kind of taper off last year, I will admit, especially in his run fit integrity. But from pure pass rush standpoint and that get off, deadly. He has a nice rip move. He has a nice spin move. He knows how to leverage speed to power and convert that speed to power. He's very, very sound at the point of attack from time to time. So I really like Alex Highsmith, number 56. I think he's going to be a stud for the Pittsburgh Steelers, playing opposite of TJ Watt. So anyone who says, oh, no, we need an edge rusher this year and we need to draft an edge rusher this year. Nah, man, you have TJ Watt and you have Alex Highsmith. You're good. The question for me comes at inside linebacker with guys like Devin Bush. Like, I don't know. That guy's so hot and cold with me. I just don't, I don't know if he's good enough to hold up in pass coverage. And I'm not so sold on Devin Bush long term. Now, that's not to say that I don't think he's a good player. I think he's a very, he's a decent player, but is he an all-pro, Pro Bowl type player that you would want in the heart of your defense? I'm not so sure. He gives up a lot. But that's why they went out and got Sherbert, right? That's why they traded for Joe Sherbert. So they wanted to find that guy who can kind of be the inside linebacker that can take away the curl hook defending assignments, right? And if you look back, dating back to 2019, they had Mark Barron, right? Mark Barron was a first-round pick for all you guys who remember Roll Tide Roll. Mark Barron was a converted strong safety, then moved to linebacker. Obviously was drafted, I believe, by the Tampa Bay Bucks, if I'm not mistaken. And he just was roasted, toasted. And I said this when I covered the Steelers for SI, and people were like, oh, no, man, he's good. And I was like, nah, man, he's not really good. Not my BDF grading system. And then they freaking obviously you know the story. He was a salary cap casualty, which I predicted, because he's not very good. So you had a game of musical chairs there at inside linebacker for the longest time, dating back to when I started covering the Steelers back in 2019 for Sports Illustrated and Fansided Network. But yeah, the Beast receipts check out. It's one of those things where you have to really look at it for what it's worth. And again, any secondary needs a strong defensive front seven. I mean, you can have the best secondary on the back end. I mean, let's go back to 1994 with the San Francisco 49ers. You can have Deion Sanders, Eric Davis, Tim McDonald, and Merton Hanks on the back end. But hey, if you didn't have Bryant Young up there, if you didn't have Dennis Stubblefield up there, if you didn't have Gary Plummer, if you didn't have Lee Woodall, I mean, come on. I'm bringing up some names here, right? If you didn't have these guys, Ken Norton Jr., if you didn't bring him over from the Dallas Cowboys from 93 team over to 94, I mean, come on. They would not be as good as they are simply because at some point the wide receiver is going to get open. It's like playing a game in the backyard of 3 flies up with no pass rush. If the quarterback has all day to throw, eventually the receiver is going to get open. Doesn't matter who you are. Eventually, he will get open. If he has all day to throw, don't mean anything. So that's why you talk about speeding up the quarterback's time clock in his head, making life difficult for him to go through his progressions, right? Things like that. Talk about the Steelers secondary. Joe Hayden, I already talked about it. He's gone. I say he's going to be gone anyways, right? They're not going to re-sign him. He's gone. As good as he is, he's not that good anymore. And my BDev grades reflect that. Now, I'm not saying he's not bad. I'm not saying he's horrible. I mean, he's still a really good, solid starting cornerback who brings veteran leadership to an NFL team. And he can get you 4 to 5 picks in any given year. That's pretty damn good. But for what the Pittsburgh Steelers need, I don't think it's well worth their investment because of the cap space that they have, just like the Chicago Bears to go out and sign Joe Hayden to a long-term extension. I would rather them re-sign Ahkello Witherspoon, who I said, and the Beast receipt checks out once he went off to the Seattle Seahawks, and then the Pittsburgh Steelers. I said, man, these guys got to steal. And then all the Niner fans are like, oh, we don't need Ahkello Witherspoon. I'm like, okay, watch. In my BF grading system, he played lights out. Lights out, really? And then they try to challenge me on that, and I was like, yeah, here's the numbers. Here's the plays. The burden of proof is on you to kind of prove me wrong, because I did the legwork. Here we are, Ahkello Witherspoon. Steelers fans love him. They love him. Right? They don't love James Pierre. And I said James Pierre was horrible, which he is. He was the worst defensive back on the Steelers last year. And I said it. And people were like, oh, no, James Pierre is good. I was like, nah, man, not my BF. He's bad. He's bad. He gets beat deep all the time. He loses contain. He's not good. He's not good. Number 42 is not good. And so I said, Ahkello Witherspoon, that's the guy that should be inserted. Right? And if you guys remember, Ahkello Witherspoon's cousin was on the show right before he went off. 2 hours before he went shipped off to the Seattle Seahawks and signed with them. He's like, what are your thoughts on Ahkello Witherspoon? And I say, hey, man, I like him. I like his height, weight, speed. I think he's a scheme fit for whatever team he goes to because he can play man. He can play zone. He's long. He has a length that NFL scouts covet. You can work with those attributes, right? It's all about coaching him up to put him in the best position, again, to make plays. And I think that's what you saw with GM Kevin Colbert. He kind of saw what he had in Ahkello Witherspoon, who led the nation in pass breakups coming out of college. And Ahkello even said, he's like, yeah, man, this is a perfect scenario for me to come to Pittsburgh to really showcase what I can do. Now, it did take some time once he got acclimated to Pittsburgh because he was on the practice squad. He wasn't really elevated. They were rolling James Pierre. They had Trey Norwood there. They had number 21. You guys went, who's Trey Norwood? Well, he was a rookie last year. Number 21 played a lot of the slot. But then Arthur Mallett. He is a guy who kind of replaced, if you guys watch the Super Bowl, Mike Hilton. Mike Hilton was number 28 for the Pittsburgh Steelers before moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals, and now he wore 21. And Arthur Mallett really took on that role. It was supposed to be Trey Norwood, but then Arthur Mallett came out of nowhere. And he started playing really well. So I really like Arthur Mallett playing that slot role. I like Ahkello Witherspoon locking down one spot. I do like the back end. I think they're not going to resign Terrell Edmonds. I don't think you do that at strong safety because, again, you have guys like Jaquiski Tartt, who we're going to talk about, who's also a strong safety on the market. You have Tyrann Mathieu, who's also on the market. And we don't even know what's going to happen with free safety Minkah Fitzpatrick if they're going to re-sign him to a long-term extension as he enters a contract year. Because you guys remember, he was a first-round pick by the Miami Dolphins, and then he was shipped out to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then played in that game against the San Francisco 49ers week 3, I believe. And a lot of pieces there, but at the end of the day, I really like what the Pittsburgh Steelers have in that defense. Now, they do need a quarterback because Big Ben has now been retired. But when you look at the entire picture, that offensive line needs retooling. But when you talk about the secondary in general and that defense in general, there's a nice pieces in play there that you can really make a run and say this is a top 5 defense year in and year out. All right. So we haven't really touched on the defensive linemen. We didn't touch on Isaiah Buggs. We didn't touch on Montravius Davis, who was a late night swing, and he was playing really, really well in the heart of that defense. And they were rotating guys like Henry Monroe, right? Henry Monroe. They were rotating other guys like Chris Wormley. Remember, he had to move outside because nose tackle Tyson Alualu went down to an injury, so he had to be the next man up. When they had to kind of swing in that nose tackle, then Chris Wormley had to kind of play that role and then also kicked outside. Then Cam Hayward obviously garnered the other side. There was a lot of pieces. And you guys got to remember, Stephon Tuitt, my first team All-Pro last year, was even active. All right, so you lose 2/3 of your starting defensive line in a 34 base, and you tell me that they didn't do a good job. They did a really, really good job there. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the 49ers. We have Alan Owens. Get to your comments. Hello, Beast. Tony Nagatani says LMFAO when talking about the Rams fan base. Yeah. Tony Nagatani says, I still like Ahkello Witherspoon. Don't at me. Yeah, I like Ahkello Witherspoon too, man. A Beast receipt checks out. I'm just saying. Who would you rather have? Emanuel Mosley and Ambry Thomas or Emanuel Mosley and Ahkello Witherspoon? Give me Ahkello Witherspoon. Not even a question. Daniel Jr. Middleton. I live in SoCal. Lambs fans are whack. Yeah, dude, let that burn for a second. I'm not throwing shade. I'm just keeping them 100. Look, I hope the Rams get a fan base. And hopefully the morale of having and winning the Super Bowl in their hometown would generate some kind of good morale for that fan base. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know. It's a big market. But LA has the Lakers. Obviously, they have the Clippers. They have the Dodgers. I don't know. I just don't see it. But, hey, you never know. I think once the Rams left for St. Louis, that was the last straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. They should have never left LA in the first place. That's just me. That's just me. All right, let's get to some of your questions here. And we got some questions here. All right. So let's talk about 49ers secondary, and then I'll get to your questions A lot of questions here. All right, so we're talking about the 49ers secondary. Obviously, Jaquiski Tartt, is he going to return? Probably not, because you have Talanoa Hufanga back there, and you have Tarvarius Moore coming back, right? So you have two players on the back end that are coming back. They're younger, they're cheaper, and you can kind of use whatever money you have left over to kind of solidify the defensive front seven. Here's the thing that I already talked about and discussed on my earlier YouTube videos when it came to re-signing Azeez Al-Shaair or DJ Jones. Who would you rather prioritize first? I would rather prioritize DJ Jones because, again, he is arguably the best run defender on the team. In fact, in my grading system, it checks out. He's the best run defender. Let that sink in. He's the best run defender on the San Francisco 49ers. 3 years running. Outside of DeForest Buckner when he was there in 2019. All right. So if you lose DJ Jones, let him walk because you have a younger, cheaper alternative in Javon Kinlaw, who can't stay healthy up to this point. Not throwing shade, those are the facts. Are you sold that Javon Kinlaw can replicate that type of production or anything close to it? Because let's face it, if you're GM John Lynch, you ain't trade DeForest Buckner to move up to 13, trade back one spot to 14 to get Javon Kinlaw to have him ride the pine as a secondary depth piece player. I'm just keeping him 100. The good news is you can move Eric Armstead and keep him at defensive tackle to take up on the double teams if Javon Kinlaw won't be able to do that. But still, there's a lot of moving parts there because at edge, you have Nick Bosa there, but other guys have to step up outside of Nick Bosa. So it's kind of a game of what do we do? And how does that affect the secondary? Well, I just talked about Jaquiski Tartt. I don't think he's coming back. I don't think K'Waun Williams is going to come back. And the reason I say that, well, you know what? I take that back. K'Waun Williams might come back depending on the situation, but he's going to be commanding a lot of money too. I mean, let's face it, the New York Jets need a slot cornerback. They need a boundary cornerback for that matter. And you saw the game of musical chairs that Robert Saleh talked about. If you keep up with all 32, you know that he's not shy about saying, hey, our corners basically suck. They're awful. Now you can come out and say and tell to the media and the beat writers, oh yeah, we're hopeful they'll lower the common denominator that all these coaches will tell you because they don't want bulletin board material to be out and about is, oh yeah, they're learning, they're growing, they're coming up to speed. They're doing everything we ask of them in practice. They're coachable. Whatever the case, I don't care. I want to see the product on the field. At the end of the day, it's all about results. No one cares about the fluff. And so the New York Jets, what are they going to do? They have 2 first-round draft picks, right? So we're talking about the draft now. Do they go after a guy like Derek Stingley, who only had 1 good year of production dating back to 2019? I covered Derek Stingley back in 2019 as a true freshman for Hot Mike, covering the LSU football team, right? And Derek Stingley, to me, has been very inconsistent since. Would be barring injuries and just inconsistent play altogether. So do you really want to play the risk versus reward game on a player who only had 1 good year of production? That was his true freshman year. I think the confirmation or the recency bias would tell us not so sure that he's going to be in return to that 2019 form. Now, I'm not saying he can't because he has a skill set to do so. So any scout will look at that and be like, you know what? Let's just bypass that because there are some traits when watching the film that we can kind of work with. And we saw what he did in 2019. So maybe he just had an off year. But then you're teetering back and forth. It's like, man, if I'm going to have a top 10 pick, you better make sure it's a home run. And going back to the 49ers secondary, we talked about 2 players that aren't going to be on the team or likely or potentially won't be on the team anymore. But then you got Emanuel Mosley there. He signed on for that 2-year deal, right? I think he signed a 2-year, $10 million deal, whatever it was. So he's coming back and he's in the contract year. And then you got Jason Verrett. Is he going to return? And how healthy is he going to be? If he gives you 8 games out of 17, is that worth it? As good as he is when he's healthy, is it worth it? I mean, these are questions we have to ask ourselves. And again, when you have a team like the LA Rams who play within the division and they know how to exploit defensive backs because of how smart Sean McVay is and leveraging those high-low concepts that I talked about in the huddle on the relevant app, you would know. It's not as easy when you talk about the levels concept on the first, second, and third level. And these are things that you have to account for, especially when you play within the division. Any GM will tell you, hey, look, you have to know what teams are doing within your division. That's the number one thing, right? Because you play those teams more than any other team out there. So if you're not really counterattacking what other teams are doing, you're going to be left in the dark. You're going to be left in the dark. Alejandro Malanche says Niners should pick Jabril Peppers to replace Jaquiski Tartt. Hufanga is a solid backup. You know, the funny thing about this is Jabril Peppers is a sexy pickup because of what he did coming out of Michigan. And I, for one, thought Jabril Peppers was going to be a beast when he was drafted by the Cleveland Browns when they had those multiple first-round draft picks. All right, I admit. But, again, is Jabril Peppers a scheme fit for what the Niners like to do? We all know he has a speed. We all know he has athletic ability. But can he really be smart enough to kind of play and what's asked of him on the back end? Jaquiski Tartt's pretty damn smart. I mean, people ride on him for that missed INT. Yeah, but I mean, okay, cool story. But you can't have the loss on Jaquiski Tartt. I mean, he played sound all year long, right? All year long. And so people dismiss the fact that Jaquiski Tartt's a really good safety. He's a really good safety. James Foster, why sign Peppers? He's not better than Tartt and would cost similar money. There you go. I would say I would agree. James Foster says, Ryan, what do you think of Rhett in the slot? That's where he started. You know what? I go back in my Beast tweet receipts. I liked Jason Everett. I like Jason Verrett more than I like Justin Gilbert coming out of Oklahoma State. And people were like, you're crazy. Like, who are you? And this is like when I first started becoming a beat writer. First few years, and I was like, nah, man, watch. Jason Verrett's going to be the truth coming out of TCU. And he was, and he came out, obviously he started as a slot coming out of the San Diego Chargers at the time. And Tom Telesco drafted him. And I really liked what I saw from Jason Verrett. Now, could he move to the slot? Yeah, absolutely. He has the oily hips. He stays square at the line of scrimmage. He has patient feet. These are things that you look for when you look for a boundary cornerback, but also in the slot. I think the slot cornerback position is much harder than the boundary cornerback position because with the boundary cornerback position, you can kind of use your leverage and pre-snap splits to your advantage. What I mean by that is you have the sideline as an extra defender. You also have help on the back end. When you're lined up in the slot, a lot of times you're just on an island. But then you also have to be mindful of where your help is so you don't get hit on a rub route, right? So you got to understand route concepts. You have to understand what the offense is trying to do based on the formation. You have to know where your help is not, and you have to leverage your split accordingly. If a guy goes in pre-motion snap across the grain, and you're looking at it like, okay, well, now that's going to change up my leverage. Do I take on the first receiver or the second receiver, right? If it's 1-2-3 trips formation to the left, how is that going to play? Like, what am I supposed to do? You have to be mindful. I think the slot cornerback position is the hardest position of all the defensive back positions. My opinion. Brandon says from the BEASTwriter family, I would say we definitely keep DJ Jones. If we can choose between Aziz and Greenlaw, I'd rather keep Aziz. Ooh, Aziz had a really good year, but it's only one good year. I like Dre Greenlaw. I would rather have Dre Greenlaw over Aziz Al-Shaair. Just me. But, again, you can make the argument that, well, Dre Greenlaw's not healthy. And you'd be right. Because the best ability is availability. And if you're not available, what good are you? You're not. You become obsolete. All right. James Foster says, who's Justin Gilbert? Justin Gilbert was the top-rated cornerback by Mike Mayock and all those draft gurus dating back to 2014. And you can check my Beast receipts. I even tweeted it out. I said, nah, man, he's gonna be a bust. He's gonna be a huge bust. I said, I'd rather have I'd rather have Jason Verrett or Kyle Fuller over a guy like Justin Gilbert. And boom, another Beast receipt checks out. How many years later? But yeah, Justin Gilbert, we can go back and talk about the cornerbacks at Oklahoma State who were busts. We can talk about the 49ers first round picks coming at Oklahoma State that were busts. We can talk about wide receiver Rashawn Woods. We can talk about freaking R.W. McQuarters, who, by the way, I liked. I liked R.W. McQuarters. Liked his guns. Liked what he brought to the table. Liked the Band-Aid. Liked his swag. Liked how he wore number 21. But, yeah. If you guys don't know who R.W. McQuarters is, that was a first-round draft pick by Steve Mariucci back in 1998. Believe it or not. And then in 1999, they got Reggie McGrew, defensive tackle out of Florida, who was a bust, by the way. All right. Brandon says, Verrett, I'm cool with keep if no guarantee money or he has to play minimum 10 games to get a certain amount. So incentivize the contract. I'd be down with that. All right. If you guys have any questions, I got answers. Send me a super chat here on YouTube or a Twitter tip on Venmo. In fact, we have some questions here on Venmo that send me some Twitter tips. And I'm just going to get to your questions. So let me just open that up because I did get some Twitter tips over on Venmo. Thank you so much. And those are the guys that I'm going to be answering your questions. So if you have a question, I got answers. Send me a super chat or tweet a tip on Twitter. All right, so here's a question. What are your thoughts on 49ers getting wide receiver Davante Adams? It's not likely. I already talked about the Chicago Bears not being in play. I don't think, why would the Niners be in play? I mean, the team already has a trio of receivers, and I'm not talking about wide receivers. I'm talking about target share. All right? When you talk about receivers in general, you have to bring in George Kittle into the equation. And when you do that, you have George Kittle, who's obviously the primary, outside of Deebo Samuel, pick 1A, 1B, I don't care. And then you have Brandon Ayuk. So that's already 3 receivers that you have at your disposal. Adding a guy like Davante Adams would only compromise that problem because there's other needs that you can allocate those funds based on your salary cap health that you're going to have from trading Jimmy Garoppolo because they're only, I think they're $5 million below in the red, right, in salary cap health. So once they clear up some money there and then they restructure some guys' roster bonus in the form of a signing bonus, then you can kind of talk about getting some more players or even re-signing some of their own. I think you want to re-keep your homegrown talent like DJ Jones, although I don't think it's going to be a possibility because DJ Jones is going to be asking what Javon Hargrave got back in 2019 offseason, well, 2020 offseason, I guess you would say, when he moved on to the Philadelphia Eagles, right? He was a 3-4 nose tackle, had a really good year in a contract year, got paid. Look what Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox are doing there with Brandon Graham. We don't know if Derek Barnett's coming back, but hey, you have Montez Sweat there. You have a lot of good players on that team. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where Davante Adams ends up. I'm joking. He's going to be franchise tagged, slapped with a non-exclusive franchise tag by the Green Bay Packers. He's not going anywhere. It's as simple as that. And I had an argument with a guy in Chicago Bears Facebook group, and he was saying, "Oh, why would Davante Adams sign that contract?" It's like, dude, he has no leverage, bro. The owner and the team holds all the leverage when it comes to the franchise tag. That's not what it was supposed to be used for, but in today's NFL, that's what it's used for. It's used to keep players in-house if you can't negotiate a long-term deal. The hope of having the franchise tag is so that you would have that extra year as a buffer to kind of work out a long-term deal. But in today's NFL, you kind of see it's kind of like, nah, man, look out Allen Robinson. Nah, man, we're just going to sign you to that 1 year top 5 salary, or 120% of the top 5 salaries in the league, or whatever the case may be, and we're just going to give that. And then if we want to use the franchise tag again, we can do it. Yeah, up the ante a little bit, but whatever. Same thing applies with Davante Adams. I mean, you don't let the best wide receiver, arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL, go for free. You're going to want to keep him in-house, if anything, right? And if you slap the non-exclusive franchise tag on him, you're going to get 2 first-round draft picks in return, or whatever compensation is negotiated. So I just don't see that happening. And again, with the money that's left over that they already don't have, you have to extend Deebo Samuel. You have to extend Nick Bosa. You have to extend your homegrown talent like DJ Jones. Otherwise, this team is going to be very top-heavy on one side of the football, and that would be the offense side. You already lost to Forrest Buckner. You want to lose DJ Jones? You want to lose Jaquiski Tartt? You want to lose some of these other key elements like Dre Greenlaw or Azeez Al-Shaair? I just don't see it. All right, another question said, you said Colts and Steelers are good fits for Jimmy Garoppolo. Why? Thank you for your hard work. Yeah, the Steelers and Colts are a good fit for Jimmy Garoppolo because they're a run-first team. You have Najee Harris and Jonathan Taylor, two of the best in the league, and backed up by a strong defense. We talked about the Steelers, and obviously the Indianapolis Colts have one of the best defenses in the NFL. They have the best off-ball linebacker in Darius Leonard. They also have DeForest Buckner up there. These are obviously household names, but you also got Moore playing the slot. You want to talk about a good slot cornerback? Arguably the best slot cornerback in the game is Moore. And then you have other guys who can kind of really fill in the pieces. They got Kwity Paye, right? Got him in the first round, who I thought in my pre-draft analysis that he would go there. Boom, another beast receipt checks out, as I got that one right. And they have key pieces in place where they can kind of, and here's another guy, Bobby Okorakoye. I like him a lot too. So just off the top of my head, I like what they have. And I think the Colts defense is built for Jimmy Garoppolo's game, which is a run-first team. I don't know. And do you honestly think Malik Willis is the answer in Pittsburgh? Todd McShay put out a trade. I don't agree with it. He says that the Steelers are going to trade out for Malik Willis. And I'm like, nah, I'm not sold on Malik Willis. I'm not sold. And what's the likely compensation for trading Jimmy Garoppolo anywhere? I said it last year and I'll say it this year. It's a second round pick. All right, it's a second round pick. All right, so moving on, we got a question from Scott. He says, what's your prediction on first 5 picks of the NFL draft? Well, Jaguars are going to go after Evan Neal. Knowing GM Trent Baalke the way I do, he's going to build the team from the inside out. He needs to get help for Trevor Lawrence and obviously injury prone now, Travis Etienne. I shouldn't say injury prone, he got hurt, but he is injury prone up until this point. So Travis Etienne, we don't know what's going to happen with DJ Shark. Are they going to re-sign him? They also got Laviska Shenault. I like him. There's a lot of good places in play there, but yeah, you have to solidify the offensive line for any of those players that I just mentioned to have success, and it all starts up front. So give me Evan Neal as the number 1 pick overall in the entire draft class as the draft board currently stands. Number 2, I'm going to go with Aiden Hutchinson. He stays in Michigan and going to the Detroit Lions. Kayvon Thibodeau is going to go to the Houston Texans. Akeem Ekwonu is going to go to the New York Jets. And the 5th overall pick is going to go to Kyle Hamilton. How many safeties get drafted inside the top 10, let alone inside the top 5? I'm going to let you guys do the math. I have the analytics on it, but it doesn't happen very often, let's just put it that way. And when it does, it actually turns out pretty good. So I like Kyle Hamilton a lot. I like his leadership qualities. I like what he brings to the table. I'm going to be running some more game film on him, but I really like what I see so far from the Notre Dame product. All right. So, yeah, pretty much. All right. Let's go ahead and get to some of your questions. If you have any super chats and if you have any questions that you want answered, send me a super chat. Obviously, it's on YouTube. You can hit the money icon, and then you can ask me a question. Otherwise, I think we're going to be wrapping this show up pretty much. And if you have yet to subscribe to the channel, please do so. Give it a like if you guys would do me a solid. You guys are obviously watching this, so give it a like if you like it, and it would definitely help me out a lot. Mariah, for our faithful lead, thank you so much for tuning in. Haven't seen you in forever. I know you're doing your thing. Thank you so much. I hope you are well as well. Hope you are well as well. Say that 10,000 times fast. Let's see, have any questions? Oh, we got a few. Oh, okay, we get some more. A lot of you guys on Twitter, huh? Like sending these tips on Twitter. All right, so we got another question on a tip. Actually, a comment. This is a comment on Twitter. He says, love your analysis. Keep up the good work. Looking forward to all your spot-on predictions when it comes to this year's draft. Thank you. Appreciate it. I appreciate the kind words, David. Appreciate the kind words. All right. I think that's going to wrap it up. I have to actually get to the gym. I got to hit my fasted cardio. I am on an empty stomach right now, believe it or not. So I do fasted cardio before I start my workout later on in the day. And the reason I do that is because I want to use the fat source as my source of energy because, again, we talk about glycogen. We can talk about fitness in here all the time. And I just throw it in here sporadically. But again, who doesn't want to get fit? Like, I don't know. Who doesn't want to better yourself is a better question. Like, who does not want to better yourself every day? I don't know. And the thing is, it's like, here I have my pre-workout. I'm gonna go ahead and go for a run. You guys asked for my pre-workout. It is in YouTube. So on YouTube, you'll see my EvoGen link, and you can see all the products that you can purchase on EvoGen's website. And just go ahead, if you have any questions, just go ahead and shoot them my way. I'll be sure to answer them the best I can. And I'll talk over all the supplements and why they're good or why they may not be good for you. But more times than not, they're going to be good for you. I haven't came across a product that was actually bad for somebody, unless you have like high cholesterol or high blood pressure. That's a different thing, and we can talk about nutrition and how that relates to it. But anyways, that's pretty much it for this YouTube live stream. I hope you guys liked what I had to say. If you did, please hit the subscribe button. Do me a solid. You guys are on Twitter. Mariah, you're on Twitter. Share this video and let's start the engagement there. And again, thank you everyone for coming in and hopping on and asking me questions. I had a lot of fun on this Truth Thursday, and that'll be it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a good day. BEASTwriter out.